Good evening.
And that's why we wait for Mikey to say go live. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. How is everyone?
Oh dear. I hope no one's got any coughs or colds. I have. The first thing I want to do is just say, I apologize. I'll make sure that I try and cough away from the mic if I do.
He was real sick this week, which
Hello,
I didn't know
Roderick.
until he came to pick me up. So I'm looking forward to getting sick next week.
Oh, you'd have been sick by now.
No, it takes a couple of weeks.
Nah.
Place your bet. Answer in the comment or the chat. Do you think I'm going to be sick next week?
Yeah, unfortunately, the day that Jan was coming over, my cough got a lot worse. I just sat here going, pretty much.
You did not sit there going. You sat there going. Hello, Roderick. How you doing?
Oh dear. So good evening. I presume everybody can hear both Jan and myself, which is good.
Let's find out.
Oh yes. So I've spent basically just over a week now being tired, lethargic, and all coldy and sniffly. So I've not been doing a lot of like heavy focus work because I don't know about you, but when you have that good old brain fog, you can't really go and do much. I did play around with some Python on both Sunday mornings, and we'll talk
you went
about
to a snake house.
I'm going to talk more about that later, though. Lots of fun.
And hello, Todd Makes Games. Good to see you,
Todd. How are you doing? So yeah, but I did do something rather exciting and new. So a couple of weeks back, I was driving along in my car. Meep meep.
Oh right, okay, I know where we're going now.
Yeah, and up came on the dash engine warning and everything. So I took it to the dealership first of all, Toyota dealership, and they wanted £2,100 to sort it out. So about $2,800, something like that. So I thought, you know what, I'll take it to an independent. There's a hybrid repair centre down the road, and they wanted even more than the main dealer. Mm-hmm. So I looked at a couple of videos on YouTube.
And did a heist.
Did a heist.
Big Payday 3 LARP.
So the part on eBay, and I know this isn't comparable, right? Because we're talking about a second-hand part and not a brand new one. But the part and the coolant and everything was less than £200, less than like $150 or something along those lines, and about 2 hours work with a coffee break. I'm just like, how come they thought this was such a difficult job? And the car is still driving. That's the important thing. I didn't fit the part.
So Devil's Avocado, you're supposed to also be, I mean, in theory, you're paying for the expertise so if something goes wrong, they can fix it.
Maybe.
Right. Like, I don't know how much that's actually stands up, but in theory.
Yeah. But touch wood, everything's been fine so far, and the car's back working. So I'm very happy, and I'm kind of proud of it, and why I wanted to share it this evening, because it was something brand new that I'd never done before. I have not done mechanics on a car ever. So this was completely brand new to me, and I was amazed that it worked out. Now, I did follow all safety procedures, because with like electric parts of cars, like 200, 300, 400 volt cars, you've got to be careful. Right. So I put on some marigolds and off I went. Yeah, and I then did the washing
he was
up.
Finished. I will impress, actually. Well, jokes aside, because I am not what you would call mechanically minded. Like, I am competent in certain areas, and that is not one of them. The last time I did any DIY, the only thing that worked in the house was the doorknob. But in fairness, it did switch the lights on, so that was pretty good.
It's one of those things, right? Because if you're trying something new and it's completely unknown, and I was anticipating complete failure of it, but I thought it was worth the risk of a couple of £100 to try and sort something out that could cost thousands. And this also reflects when you're trying something new in Blender or in Godot, where you're trying something and there is minimal risk of failure, small risk of death with using blenders sometimes. Maybe. I don't know.
No, you're on your own with this one.
Falling apart at this point, yes. But yeah, trying something new, and it's not often that I try something new. You know, once you start to get older, you kind of stick to things that you're good at, rather than going, "Oh, I'll try something." And yeah, I think that's something that if you want to try something, just go for it. Especially if
I
it's
mean,
software and free.
a lot of what I've learned, especially in coding, has been through what ifs and experimentation and
Yeah.
playing with a shiny technique until I can get it working. I make a lot of mistakes on the way, but it is a fun way of learning. Not everyone enjoys it, from what I can see. Like some people really need a structured path forward, and that's fair.
Well, I fortunately had a structured path. It was the technician's manual for doing it. It's like undo
I
these
should point
18
out,
bolts and be careful.
I am not advocating the learning styles theory of education because that is not supported by any.
Learning styles, is that the kinesthetic,
Right. I mean, it's a
auditory?
theory that's been popular the last couple of decades. And at least when I was doing my education masters, there was no peer supported evidence out there that, or peer reviewed evidence
Is
out
it
there that supported learning styles as a
is it
theory.
one of those things that sounds like it
It's one of
might be
those
good and
things.
therefore it kind of sticks in people's minds?
It's a bit like left brain, right brain, creative, analytical. Like it's not actually true. And it's based on some observations that have been misinterpreted and sort of
Yeah.
oversimplified and put out in the press, and then people have taken those and run with them. Um,
Mm.
but it sounds good, so people go with it. But there is no data that says that Mikey is a kinesthetic learner and I am a visual learner. Like you might be better in certain circumstances at certain tasks.
Yeah.
You might understand things in a different way and have cultural context, but you are not inherently a kinesthetic learner,
Yeah, that
at
makes
least as
sense.
far as we can tell. If it is out there, we haven't found the data for it yet.
I mean, I certainly personally always have benefited from doing the thing, but I don't think that means necessarily that I'd be a kinesthetic learner. It's just the fact that doing something is reinforcement learning, right? You're doing it over and over again often in order to get something right.
I mean, depending on where you are in your life and what kind of day you're having and what you know about a subject,
Hmm.
getting your hands dirty and playing with it might be the best way of doing it. But it might also be good to just sit there and learn the theory first. Like you are capable of all these things. It's not the case that a certain type of brain is better at a certain type of task, as far as we know.
I know.
And I should point out that I graduated my master's in 2015.
Things might have
No, I
moved
didn't.
on from then.
2014, 2013.
Yeah.
Around there. Like 10
Around the
years ago.
turn of the century. Yeah.
It may have changed. Like I haven't been keeping up to date with the papers.
Yeah, what talking about learning for a second. We're going off script already. Yeah, screw the agenda.
He sent me this agenda, and I'm like, I can't talk about that because I don't understand the subject. He's like, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
I
roll
don't think
with
I
it.
will.
No, but learning stuff. I found myself occasionally being caught in the trap of I don't know if there's a technical term for it, like phantom learning, where you watch someone doing something, and at the end of it, your brain kind of goes, "Cool, I've learnt a thing, I've done a thing," and you've been incredibly passive and haven't actually learnt anything. If you were asked to regurgitate that and do what you just watched, it's unlikely that you could recall a lot of what's going on.
So there's a couple of things that sounds like. One is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is often used as an insult, but we're all prone to it. Which is the less you know of a topic, the more capable you think you are at that
Yes.
subject. Because you don't understand the complexities, you don't understand how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's only as you start developing understanding in a topic or mastery of a topic that you start realizing you know very little of it, which is often why
it's almost a beginner of imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Right. Tends to correlate. Doesn't always mean, but tends to correlate with mastery of a subject. The better you are, the more nervous you are when you start using that information because people are calling you an expert, and no, there's a lot I don't know. Like I can't do this, and this, and this. And there's balancing it. It doesn't mean that if you know you don't know everything, you're an expert. Like it's not magical. But.
Oh no, and the term expert is thrown around and misinterpreted all the time. Years and years ago, when I was fixing people's computers, I went around someone's house and they had a Ricoh printer.
Oh, okay.
And
Not like one of those mob
I don't know if that's
war.
the actual thing. So it wasn't a Hewlett Packard or an Epson, which were commonplace when I went around. But anyway, the point of being an expert is when I went round, I said that, oh, this is usually a commercial type printer rather than one that people use in home. And he was like, oh yeah, I got it from work, and that kind of all made sense. But then he said to me, well, I thought you were an expert. You should have known everything about that printer. It's
Yeah.
like, really? And so there's that kind of misconception of what an expert actually means.
I mean, an easy way of saying this is take your first language, which in my case would be English, but whatever yours is, there's probably a bunch of words you don't know, have never heard before,
Oh,
or
all the
don't pronounce
time.
correctly,
I make up
right?
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, like you are still fluent, but you're not omniscient. And the other thing it reminds me of, and this is something I talked about when I went to Godot back in 2019. Was it really 4 years ago? Wow.
Yes.
Is Bloom's taxonomy, which is a way that
Mm.
we split learning into lower order and higher order skills. And you kind of need to start at the bottom, work your way up. But at the very bottom is memorization.
Yeah.
Like
Learning something by rote. Like
right,
times
just repeat.
tables when I was young. You
Like
just
2 times
repeat
2
them
is
until
2, 2
yeah.
times 4 is a higher
Anyway,
number.
yeah, after a certain
Drum
while
degree.
it goes.
Right.
Because you've not been repeating it daily.
Right. And at the very, very highest level is creation, where you take all the information you've got and create a new part of it. Like you're adding to the body of knowledge. So sticking with language as an example, right? There is a massive difference between learning French and saying "Je m'appelle Yann"
Bonjour, Jan.
and going to the hotel and saying "Il y a quelque chose qui va pas avec ma chambre. Quelqu'un a repassé avec une placard." Non, ça c'est pas une chambre. No.
Does anyone know what he's saying?
Right. So
I heard champagne.
complaining about
Let's
the size
go.
of your room. And then at the higher level is neologisms, right? Where you're creating new words and turns of phrase and things like that, where you understand the language well enough you can play with it. But that's a higher level of mastery. Sitting there and passively watching something doesn't engage metacognition, doesn't engage the higher level skills. So you're probably fulfilling the lower order skills, but you're not going to get to sort of mastery.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Expert is the opposite of impert. Yes, which is why if you're impertinent, you don't know anything.
You heard it here? No, probably not first, but
I'm surprised I stuck that. Thanks, Roderick. That was a good setup.
ta-da! Write those things down. So yes, a little segue away from learning. I'll be interested to anybody listening at the moment, watching, how you actually like learning. Do you prefer learning by reading something first and then looking at videos, and then are you what I'm going to call a holistic learner? Do you look at lots of different things, or do you just gravitate towards? I mean, YouTube is absolutely fantastic. If it wasn't for YouTube, I wouldn't have been able to do that Carfex, right? Because I wouldn't have been able to see the procedure.
YouTube is fantastic if you are able to discern what is sensible and what is nonsense.
Yes, yeah, and absolutely fine. For instance, on this car thing, some of the videos omitted some of the main safety things, like unplugging the traction battery and things like that. They had assumed that would have already been done, or it was assumed that things.
I mean, you remember when ChatGPT 4 was released to the public, and there were all these articles about, is this actually going to help you?
Yeah.
There was this great article in, I can't remember which computer magazine it was, where they tested, how to install a new motherboard and processor. And they said the problem was about 95% of the instructions were good, and 5% would break your computer. And if you don't know what you're doing and you just type that in, you're going to break the computer.
Yeah, absolutely. But since you brought up ChatGPT and AI, obviously in the news at the moment, there has been the Sora. I think it was Sora. Have you seen what it can do at the moment?
Is that the new stable diffusion thing?
Yeah, the 1 minute long video by OpenAI. No, it's absolutely mind-blowing how far we've come in like a year. It's still not quite there, but I think it's going to be great for filler content, for B-roll and things like that, because if you're not paying attention to it, it will pass as something, which is pretty useful.
I'm mixed on this generative AI stuff. I have
some
friends who are still
experiences.
professors, and the statistics they're hearing is that half to a third of undergrads are using OpenAI to write their papers, which I mean is cheating, but more to the point, those students aren't learning anything.
Yeah, it is a shame coming from teachers, right? That people are trying to get ahead with it, and GPT is incredibly powerful, and there are other LLMs out there, large language models. We're just going to focus on GPT because it's the one we kind of know about. One of the things that I've used extensively, I use it to quickly proofread something, make sure that it's clear, make sure the sentiment of things correctly, and you can use things like Grammarly to do the same sort of thing. But recently, I've also asked it some technical stuff. Whether that's to do with coding, whether that's to do with some mathematics stuff. Recently, I won't do a whole physics lesson here, but I was talking about electronics. I think actually last time we were on, I was speaking about electronics. And I was talking about putting batteries in series to increase the voltage, and then you put those batteries in parallel to increase the capacity of those. And even when I was explicit, it was getting it wrong every time. I just asked it to help me with battery arrangement to see if there were any other configurations. And it got all the numbers there, and it was doing sums and calculations, and then the end result was wrong. And the only way I knew that was wrong is because I'd already done well, not the only way, but because I had actually pre-checked the work and I knew what I was going for, and I was exploring the space rather than relying on it. If that was someone doing a physics paper, or something along those lines, what GPT was, and this was GPT-4 through Bing, it was completely wrong. And I've had the same thing with Python. So it'll write a really nice snippet of code. I'm like, brilliant. And it'll write this really nice snippet of code. Then I'm like, okay, I'll put that together in a function. Right, I want to add this to it. And what it's done at some point is removed this function or this little bit that it's written. It's forgotten that. It's out of context. And I know these sort of things over time will actually probably get better. But the fact that it just destroyed itself and then produced code after code after code. And maybe this is why they say you need to be a prompt engineer, because if you're not careful, it just goes off the rails.
I'm also unsure what I think about generative AI on a sort of ethical ground. And there was a really interesting video by Philosophy Tube a little while back on ethical AI. And Abigail Stone made some really interesting points. And one of the points was that, I mean, we hear about this a lot. The way these models are trained is by sourcing huge amounts of proprietary information without permission,
or just people's work, right? Whether it's
and the argument that these companies have made in the past include things like, well, if we didn't do this, the technology wouldn't work, which is a weird argument.
It's like, if I don't steal all this food, then people will go hungry. So this Sora thing that's just come out, it's going to come across the same sort of stuff that all the pictures have. What happens when someone uses that in a commercial work and actually it resembles almost identically another piece of actual copyrighted generated work?
Well, there was an interesting thing with the actors union in the US, I think SAG-AFTRA, I can't remember which union it was, where the union had agreed to allow actors' likenesses to be training material for AIs, and the actors hadn't voted on this.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of people who work in games specifically who were like, so you're just going to use my voice without me in it. So and writers of games are like, so we're just out of a job now. You're just going to get an AI to write dialogue.
So there's a thing that you will get if you sign up and join companies. Udemy had this written into their description at some point in the past. I don't know if they still do. So I can use those as an example of something in the past. But where it says we can use your likeness, etc., etc., and this is before AI and everything, but a lot of companies have something along the lines of we can use your likeness, your material for promotion, etc. Now, with the fact that voice cloning exists and video cloning exists, we're approaching a point where that contract that you signed actually will cover this making you say things on behalf of that company, because you said they could. They can use your likeness, right?
There's some interesting...
It's like, whoa, I did, because you signed it not even knowing this new thing existed.
I mean, making original works with someone else's likeness without their permission is a whole. Watch the Philosophy Tube video. It's really good. I mean, it's It's about 40 minutes long, if I remember correctly, but it's worth it.
I agree with.
There's a lot I could say about that. But...
I agree with Charlie here, where he says that
Yeah.
ChatGPT and similar is indeed a problematic tool when it comes to teaching and learning. You need a certain level of knowledge to get the best out of it. 100%. On the Python course, I introduced people to ChatGPT really early on. Look, it's a really fabulous tool. Use it. If you've got a problem with your code, like there's an indent wrong or you've missed a semicolon, it's going to spot it almost immediately for you. That's better than you spending half an hour looking for the missing thing that you...
Right, and I remember a little while back, I was hanging on the Godot Facebook group, and there were a bunch of people who were asking, how do I do X? And a lot of the answers they were getting were type it into ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that might work, but they won't know why.
Yes.
Like, you haven't taught them anything.
This is the Stack Overflow problem, where in the days of yore, you used to go to Stack Overflow, oh, yeah, that bit of code works, and you'd insert it into your project. But if you don't understand how it works, you can't properly integrate it. That's always going to be the challenge.
At that point, you might as well be learning magical phrases, right? Because you don't know what they're actually doing. They're just symbols that make the universe change, which is cool and exciting. But
yes, some of the best cooks don't follow a recipe. They become chefs, and they understand the chemistry of the food. They understand why you combine these things together.
And when we talk about subject mastery, that's really what we're talking about, right? Is not just understanding what happens, but why, how, when, and I don't know, we'll go with why and where. We're just who. Let's put all the questions in there. Wherefore. But it allows you to play with things in a much richer way.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to try that one.
Expecto code workium. It's code workiar, actually. I don't even like the Potter series. They still can do their joke.
Yeah. Should we? Okay. We were going to talk a little bit about AI later, but now we've done it now.
Really? Yeah, I missed that bit.
Yeah, I might have. Yeah. Anyway,
what are we talking about now?
Let's talk a little bit about Godot for everyone. And for those who have a keen eye, you'll notice the stream was named Discovering Godot rather than Godot for everyone, and no one spotted it, so it's fine.
Yeah, and the best thing is, because no one spotted it, and I pointed out to Mikey just before we went live, nobody knew, and then Mikey went and put it in the video, and now it's there forever.
I can delete the VOD later. Don't clip this. Or share it with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So just before we started, I was like, hey, Mikey, do you want a copy of the latest version of Spooky Brick so you can play it on the thing? It was like, we have like 10 minutes to go. I was like, yeah, okay. Do you have it zipped? Like, okay. So I upload it, and he goes, oh, this is a tar. I can't open this.
I needed to get.
Can you re-zip it, upload it? Like, not in the time without something going wrong. Like, let's just not get that stress. But Spooky Bricks involves a bat, who I need to name, and Bob the Skull as a ball, and a bunch of bricks. And we'll teach you how to make a bat and ball clone. And it's all very spooky themed and cute with power-ups and big words everywhere. It's pretty close to ready. We're going to start recording, I think, on Wednesday. The setup is all there and ready to go.
Yep.
We need to do a couple of background noise checks and balance checks and things, but we should be good to go.
I did think about putting a little button on the stream today so I can just show people a desk and 2 monitors, and I was like, why? Why?
Show the picture you sent me.
I can't easily do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna sort it out.
And Daruton Souza is put some laughing fish. I don't.
Laughing at me being funny, probably. Or you. You're funnier than I.
I don't think that's true. So yeah, Mikey was asking, do we want to put this on? Well, in fact, what he said is it ready for you to put itch.io as a demo today? Like, no. He's like, really? Because it looks pretty playable. There's 2 things missing. One is any level apart from the first one, and the second is a menu that allows you to quit, restart, or go to the main desktop. Both of those are kind of critical. Do you guys want this on itch.io as a demo? I mean, typically we put it on there so people can try it before they do the course. I'm not sure that the world is short of breakout bat ball brick buster clones. Like
I've
they've been
had
around since the
this.
70s.
I don't know whether this is going to cut our audio out, but I'm just going to switch to the picture of the setup without anybody at the computer. There you go. Lovely. Oh, yeah, you can still be heard, but
Great.
awesome.
So I was there last Wednesday getting ready for the Thunder Record, making the course image and stuff. And there's a lovely little spooky piece of music that I got, a CC0 piece of music, so I can distribute it and you guys can use it, and there's no rights problems. And it's just this little like spooky arpeggio. Mikey hears it, goes, ooh. And then he sits quietly coughing for like 2 hours with his headphones on. I just keep hearing these electric guitars blaring out of his headphones. I'm like, he's doing something. At which point he's like, yeah, come in the living room and I'll play what I made. Okay. Mikey started with, I'm going to make a slightly different version of that music, so it's a bit longer. And we can
I've forgotten about this.
And he had made the soundtrack of every space RPG ever with little industrial breaks in the middle. Like, it went way out of scope. It doesn't fit the game at all.
Oops.
So I think Mikey should put that for download somewhere. So you two could play Mikey Bricks.
I will. I'll post that over on the Discord channel, on the Hash Music channel.
Mikey, we have a Discord.
We do.
You should link that.
I did have a type completer thing.
All right, that's what I thought was going to happen.
Nope, I got to type it manually, so hopefully I get this right. PPP Discord. So that is our Discord, and I will go and post the music track.
Thank you, Deruton. I'm hoping I'm saying your name right. Let me know if I'm not. That's very good to hear, and I'm delighted to hear it, especially as I'm struggling to get my brain back into a space where I can actually get recording done. So yeah, let's talk about what's coming. So we talked about this a lot last week, and I've had a lot of health issues recently that have stopped me from doing anything at all. Like I've basically been stuck in my house. But I'm slowly getting back to the stage where we can get some recording done. So the idea is spooky bricks, so we can continue with Godot for everyone. And then once we've got that and maybe the next one on the belt, we can start working on the RPG Godot videos that I've got planned and made, curriculum's done for, but I need to actually sit down and record. And hopefully get my brain back into some sort of working order.
There you go. That's now over on there. Called Not So Spooky.
So Spooky Bricks started as a pun on Tukey Bricks. And then just to make Mikey giggle, I put a skull and a bat in because it's a bat and ball. See, it's a bat. I have a bat around here somewhere.
Ah, yes. Oh dear.
And it's getting reasonably compelling. Like I got Mikey playing it, and he was bad at it.
Yeah. It's a very compelling game. It's the feel. You got the feel really nailed, so it doesn't feel like you're fighting against the controls or anything along those lines. It actually yes, I just read that. It actually feels like a very fluid game, which is what that type of game needs to be.
Right, and it's like the way it's designed allows us to teach how to use a tile map with physics elements, so how to hit a tile map with a ball and know which tile is being hit and what to do about it. Here's Caboodle. Hi, Cat. Yeah, clearly talking about you.
Cat and ball, bit different.
There's a system of putting in power ups so that it's all modular. There's some fun things going on, and then we got some weird philosophical problems that turned up.
Yes, like the unstoppable. So there's a power up that allows the ball to instantly destroy a brick or pass through all the bricks. It doesn't bounce; it just goes through and gets rid of everything. But what happens to an unstoppable when it hits a undestructible brick? My answer was black hole, but That was a bit
Right.
difficult to model.
But we added an unbreakable brick, and we had the unstoppable force immovable object problem.
We just decided to let it pass through.
Yeah.
It's the easiest result. Good evening, Munster.
Excuse me. Kabul is very excited to see everybody. His cat's asleep. He doesn't care.
All right.
So yeah, that's where we are with Godot for everyone. Currently, I'm going to Mikey's once a week to get out of this space so I can have a recording space that is different from my everyday space, so I can be in that mindset. So far, it's working quite well.
And I get to see Jan personally, which is even better.
I'm so sorry,
I planned this all along.
I'm so sorry. All right, so that was that. Spooky Bat, really?
Dookie Bricks.
Spooky Bat. I'm reading your agenda here. Talk what's left prototype.
Oh, I've deleted half the stuff as we're going. So
prototype wise, I just need to add the ability to add more than one level, which isn't particularly difficult. We now have a working options menu, and I want to put in an ability to go back to the main menu from anywhere in the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the next thing from myself, I was talking about Python earlier and how I've been playing with it. There's going to be a new section in the Blender Python course, and then I'll be moving on to next things from there. So those with the Blender Python course, there'll be a new section incoming for you shortly.
What have we got here? Godot news. Share the latest Godot news. There's a really interesting article on the Godot site about things I don't understand.
So I'll just touch on the one that I thought was really awesome is...
you wanted to talk about this. I'm down.
Well, DirectX 12 is how you're going to get access to things like ray tracing. And ray tracing doesn't
on a Windows
make
machine.
a game... yeah. Or maybe further. Who knows if NVIDIA ever open up. But of course, DirectX 12 has those APIs for ray tracing. So actually, you can use them under AMD as well, because some of the newer cards have the multiplication matrices.
DirectX is a Windows thing.
That is true. Maybe the Vulkan API will do it. I don't know. I haven't read through the article anyway, fully. But with DirectX 12, it enables things like ray tracing. So it will potentially increase the visual fidelity of games made in Godot, which is brilliant. I mean, having access to some of those later features is phenomenal, because one of the things that potentially will hold back Godot is not having those shiny features. And they don't make brilliant games, right? But they attract people to the engine.
I mean, I don't know. It depends on the aesthetic. So by aesthetic, when we talk about aesthetic, we're using it a slightly different way. We don't just mean the way it looks. We're talking about everything about it that makes you feel a certain way. What is it trying to make you feel, and what does it do to do that? It could be the color scheme, it could be the mesh or the graphics, it could be the music, it could be the pacing. But I want the player to feel X. The aesthetic is everything that allows that to happen. And in some cases, that high fidelity graphics is part of the aesthetic. No Man's Sky is a great example, right? Really strong art style, very strong sound design. And it's part of it. I think if you remove that from the game, you would be left with a very empty wandering around. I mean, imagine it as an ASCII game.
It wouldn't work as well.
You'd learn, or even a text-based game. You'd land there and read pages about this wonderful world you can't see.
I mean, it's certainly
landing on a world and going, there's
realistic, right?
Everywhere. It could be fun, but it'd be a very different game, right? Like the aesthetics make a big part of that game. But I do agree that next gen wonderful photorealistic graphics are not the high watermark of good game.
No, but of course, ray tracing is synonymous with having phenomenon. With having like high-end, ultra-realistic graphics. However, you don't have to use ray tracing like that. You can use it incredibly creatively as well. The problem is you do start to alienate potential players because they have to have... I only know the NVIDIA side of things. I think it's 6000 series and up with AMD, but you need at least a 20 series card. When you have a look at Steam survey, always do. They just released a new one. They just did a new survey, and still you've got like the likes of the 1660 now. It used to be the 1060, and you've got the 1660 and 2060.
I mean, I'm on 1060. Like,
And of course, the 2060, if anybody's ever tried to use ray tracing with the 2060, knows that it can do it. Whether or not you'd want to is
be bad, Todd.
yeah. See you later, Todd.
I'm reminded of a conversation just when the new ray tracing technology was announced a few years back, like 5 years ago. Mikey and I were talking with someone that we don't talk to these days, but we were talking to a lot at the time. And this person's belief was that ray tracing was going to revolutionize games, not just from a graphics point of view, but it's going to fundamentally change how games are played, because now you'll be able to like see the reflection and know there's a guy around the corner. I'm like, that's
been possible with rasterization.
That's a gameplay mechanic.
Yeah.
Like that's not revolutionary. That's, I could see around a corner. That's the basics of every stealth game ever.
I mean, I've been quite bullish on it, but not for gaming, because of the optics, which is the ray tracing side of things for Blender. It's sped up ray casting, which is a way of rendering in Blender, no end. And I've got a 30 series card, and that can do it really well. And the 40 series cards are even better at it. And it's at that point, it's a productivity tool for me. But it also allows me to explore variations and explore that whole domain really, really quickly. And so I've always been quite bullish on that sort of tech. It does make games look pretty, but it also slows games down. And if I play, so one of my favorite games is Dying Light 2, and that got a DirectX 12 update with all the ray tracing and everything else. It's really, really pretty, but boy, does my room heat up when my computer goes, oh, ray
we
tracing,
had a problem yesterday
watts.
when we were playing Void Crew. As you may know, Mikey and I and a couple of other friends play games every week on Sunday.
Yeah.
And this week we decided to go back to Void Crew, which is a great game. We had a really good time. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I'm running an older graphics card on a Linux box. So I'm having to use Proton, and it's fine. But in this particular game, with this update, I was getting massive latency. I managed to get rid of most of that. There's a little bit left, and it wasn't an issue until I got killed repeatedly because the game didn't agree on where I was.
You're now in the engines.
Oh my God. Every time I went near the engines, there was a fire in the engine room. Easy. Walk close to it, not into the fire, and press E. Burn to death. Go back in, burn to death. This happened repeatedly. And then finally we got our friend Matt, and he's just like, you just go in here and press E. He's like, I know. And then I go outside the ship and I get burned by the engines.
Yeah,
so Mikey's like, the engines are off. Like, well, clearly not. So sometimes that's slow frame rate will kill you.
And turning options off. Speaking of options, one of the things that you can often have better options with is having a more up-to-date version of something like Blender. And so
I knew you were going to try and make that segue.
So Blender 4's been out since November last year. I know it was a tight one. However, there's also Blender 3.6 long-term support, or LTS. And I was having a discussion with one of the students the other day about what to do, because he doesn't want to upgrade at the moment. It's an interesting discussion because, I want the new shiny, right? I want all the new tools and features, etc.
I haven't even looked what they are, I'll be honest.
Well, it's not just that. It's a question. Some people go, well, why is there even an LTS thing, without the sort of like knowledge that, well, actually, a lot of people have things like add-ons.
Yeah, a lot of add-ons don't update that well.
I've still got a copy of Blender 2.79 on my computer because it will do normal renders much quicker when I'm doing texturing and things like that. I don't need to use it that often, right? But it's a tool that I know works in this very specific niche situation, and I haven't been able to replicate it properly in the later Blender versions. And it's just the way that the old Blender render system worked. It was just the Blender render, when it was called that. So one of the things to always watch out for, and you can have multiple versions of Blender on your computer, which is absolutely fantastic, but you go ahead and update Blender, suddenly your add-ons don't work.
Yeah, I found that.
And the same's true of Godot. Godot.
And that's why I don't use Flatpak anymore on my Linux machine, because I don't have control, if I'm using Flatpak, of when that's going to happen. And on some programs, that can be critical.
Oh, yeah, I've always given people a warning. So you can install Blender or Godot using Steam.
Mm-hmm.
There is a problem that you can only run one thing at once through Steam. So if you're like working in Godot and not install, sorry, run one thing at a time. No, does that not apply for software? Just games?
Doesn't apply for games either.
I should try that again later.
Might be because you've got family mode shenanigans going on.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I'll have another
I'm pretty sure that's not true.
But with
Just going to run a couple of games. Don't mind me. I'm going to play some games.
No worries. But one of the things with Steam, of course, or any automatic updating, is that it can update and it can. With Blender, for instance, if you hadn't realised it had happened, you just click away the splash screen. Off we go. Oh, it looks a bit different. You save a file. Now, between Blender 2.8 and 3, there was huge change in the went to MantaFlow. And so that when you actually opened up a file and saved it, you then can open it up in previous versions. And I know a load of people lost work with simulations and things like that because the system changed.
I mean, I had that with versions of Godot from 3 to 4.
And that's why the long-term support ones work. If you're working on a project, it's often better to lock in those features that are available to you than worrying about the new shiny things. And the same's true with Blender. If you're working in the professional sense, you need that Blender to be working, that installation of Blender to be working. You need to know that your add-ons and everything that you got with it. And I remember many, many years ago when I have a load of add-ons. I also have a Blender for teaching because I don't want all the add-ons on there because it'll confuse things. But having to redo all of those things and finding that something that you used to click, I had Andrew Price's lighting. I can't remember studio lighting stuff, and it was brilliant because I could set my model up, one click. That looks presentable, right? I didn't have to do any extra faff along the lines of presenting it just to get something out. And I was like, yeah, brilliant. And then it stopped working. I had to wait for him or his team to actually come along and actually release the up-to-date and working version. And sometimes the working version was just a matter of going into the Python file and changing the version that it was compatible with.
Yep.
And then it worked.
Mikey, what's this bit about yellow paint you've written here?
Getting lost in games.
That I understand. What's the yellow paint thing?
So I first encountered it with Naughty Dog a few years back.
Yeah, okay. I see where you're going.
Yep.
So, getting lost in games. I'm on board now. Go for it.
Yeah. So getting lost in games is an interesting one and a really, really frustrating thing when... I mean, I've had multiple instances of I've walked into a room, the thing I should have looked at was on the left, but I looked right, and then I proceeded forward, and I explored the rest of wherever I was, but the thing I was looking for was right on the left, but you never come right back to where you've entered or something along those lines, and you're lost. Whereas you can use things like yellow paint on the surfaces of the things that you could grab, or white or worn marks. All of those sorts of things are affordances to help players to know where to go. And there's been a bit of a thing at the moment about yellow paint ruining games, and it's been around for years. I think someone's making a mountain out of a molehill with it. But I understand that in certain situations, you're going to be potentially spoiling the game, but I think it's more about accessibility.
I mean, you get this
else.
with like breadcrumb trails in RPGs and markers on HUDs and things. Yes, it's good to have a game design that doesn't rely on them if there's other reasonable ways the player can be expected to find their way around them. So, for example, I forgot the name of the thing. The procedural crime game, City of Doubt, something like that.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
Steam.
Shadows of Doubt.
Shadows of Doubt. That's the bunny. Thank you. Shadows of Doubt has this amazing system with procedurally generated city, procedurally generated crimes, and procedurally generated clues. And if you didn't have the map, you would have no way of playing that game because the street names would be nonsense. Even then, it can be hard to find specific buildings. Like you need to wander around and get things done. But if you imagine that in something like GTA, that would be impossible. Like you kind of need the markers. Yeah. Do they ruin the game? Kind of. Like I see it. Like I see what you mean when you've cluttered the entire view with all the quest markers and the little yellow line on the road, and there's no navigation. Like if you need navigation and exploration to be part of the game, get rid of it.
Yeah.
But replace it with something that works.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, I don't mind those sorts of things, and I think in the remasters of some of their games, Naughty Dog toned down the yellowness of it. It wasn't quite right,
I
and
mean, stuff like
it's
that
odd
has
because
existed for a long time, right? Like
yeah,
usually it's done with light. Like you
yes,
just
that's another
draw
way.
the player's attention over here without them
Yeah,
realizing you're doing it. That's what you're trying to do. But like the Tomb Raider games using white and Naughty Dog using yellow, and sure.
yeah,
I would like something a bit more subtle. 7 Days to Die uses light.
hmm
Like internally, if there's a way through they want you to go, they'll light the thing. The problem is once you know that's what they're doing, you just start looking for torches.
yes, yeah.
Like knowing that ruins the game. Sorry.
Yes, I've been playing and watching over shoulder of players in the past, and they're stuck, and I said, well, go that way. How do you
Yeah.
know? That bit's lit up.
Lit.
It's got a little really subtle things, like there's a bit of broken caution tape or police tape, and it's flapping in the direction you need to go, right?
I mean, it's the same technique that painters use for centuries to
To
draw the
draw the
eye.
eye. Yeah.
That's what you're doing, right? You're using color and shape and texture to draw the eye in this direction.
And we've got a somewhat a problem when we get to more realistic games. Obviously, if you go back to let's go back. You mentioned Tomb Raider. Go back to the original Tomb Raider. It's obvious if a ledge was there because it was blooming just a quad, right? It's just you go up and over. But these days, things are capable of looking incredibly detailed and realistic. How are you going to know as a player where to go? And obviously, I believe Naughty Dog actually said in their testing, in their play testing, that we put these things in because people genuinely didn't know where to go. They were getting lost and getting frustrated with the gameplay. And I think it can be difficult as a seasoned gamer where you've played lots and lots of games. You know all of these affordances by heart, and you can just breeze through. You can choose to ignore them, get frustrated by them. But if you're a brand new player, then not having those affordances could ruin the game completely.
Go back to the aesthetic, right? Like these Naughty Dog games aren't built around the idea of being lost.
No.
They're built around the idea of flow. Like
Yes.
you're going to keep moving and feel like an action hero. So you need to know which way to go.
Exactly, yeah.
There was a great video by... Sorry, my brain isn't working. I'm hoping you can't hear my washing machine go ping, ping, ping at me. There was a great video by Game Maker's Toolbox a while back.
Yes, yeah.
On exactly this, and talking about the subtle way in which these levels are designed to give the impression of open world freedom, while actually being very limited and linear. And the secret is not letting the player know it's linear, like making them think there's this huge path, but actually there's one way through.
Oh yeah, when I played The Last of Us 2, it's like you're in this immense city, and you get this feeling of progression as you're going towards like a Ferris wheel in the distance, because you can see it. It's small. You go through these building complex, incredibly linear because that's the only progression path, and then it's bigger, and then it's bigger, and as you're progressing, it creates a sense of scale where in reality you've just followed a corridor, but it's a very natural feeling corridor.
And then again, like I don't like it when games go full cinematic and take the choice away from you, and you end up playing what's effectively a cutscene with you walking from point to point while things explode around you. Like that's not a thing I enjoy, but plenty of people do, so that's fine too.
Yeah,
that's why we have motion blur in game for these people.
But I hate motion blur.
I hate motion blur. All right.
I think for the last 10 minutes, yeah, we can talk about what we've been playing.
This week, I have mostly been eating.
Right, hands up in chat who understands that reference.
There's a reference from the 90s. Mikey, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a game that's been made in Godot. Or Godot. Or Godot.
Probably, but all three of them.
Yes. So I've been playing a game called Dome Keeper.
Which came out last year, I believe.
I think so. But it's one of those games that's actually opened up and become much, much more than I thought it was to begin with. There's unlocks and progressions and a different type of miner Not young
Yep.
person, but going
So for those
mining
who
for
don't know,
resources.
Stonekeeper is you're sent to an alien world to get some resources, and you have a dome you have to protect and resources you have to mine.
Yeah.
And every now and again,
You get waves of
creatures will come
enemy,
and
and
attack
it
your dome.
gets harder and harder, so you have to have better
So it's a
weapons,
mining tower
better
defense
shields.
game.
Yeah.
There you go.
In many ways, it's a bit like Mission Control. Is that the one where you have to protect the cities back in the 80s, where you... Pew,
Missile command.
Missile command, yeah. Mission Control. I was close. There were some words in there that were...
Some of the letters were probably the same.
Yeah. But I've been having an absolute blast with it. The other one that I really like, but I haven't actually picked up in a while, is a game called Delta V. It's a mining improve your thing in the rings of Saturn. And I thought it was a very interesting game. It's basically a side scroller with all the way to the left being back to base and all the way to the right how far you can go. But you've got things like, because you're mining, I wouldn't say it was realistic per se, but it's pretty hardcore in the fact that you've got so much fuel. If you go and run out of fuel, you're not getting home, that sort of thing. But if you fill your hole full of asteroid mining stuff, some of it's worth more, some of it's worth less, rocks, minerals, whatever it is, then your ship becomes very, very sluggish because you're full of rock. So I enjoyed that as a physics-based game. And
of course, we played Enshrouded last week, didn't we?
Yes. You made my house blue. You
made the blacksmith live in a hole.
It was an aesthetic.
It was an aesthetic. This is a debate we had for a while. We played some Enshrouded, which I really enjoyed. We got lost a lot. Mikey blew me up with a grenade within 3 minutes.
I blew you. No, yeah, with a grenade. I went to go throw the grenade and you just ran into it. That's my story. Like, and then you shot a barrel that I
maybe that always happens. Like, what have I been playing? I've been playing No Man's Sky, the new Echoes update. Not Echoes.
Yeah, I saw there was Omega. A new update.
Update was a lot of fun. There was a little expedition I did, which gives you a whole bunch of new shiny stuff. That's fine. We haven't been playing No Man's Sky multiplayer, principally because Michael did not get on with it.
I was enjoying it until I lost everything in my ship.
The UI in that game is rough.
Yeah.
And our friend Matt, who did play with us and got into it really big, suddenly decided, I'm done with this. Didn't enjoy the flight mechanics.
It was the interface for me.
Which is fine. Like, I get that. Like, there are times you're accidentally build up the build menu and you're trying to do something else. Like, just...
Oh, that sort of thing was fine. It was the point that I had gone around gathering a load of resources ready to do upgrades and things like that. And then I was like, oh, a new shiny ship. I'm 100% sure I read that it will transfer your stuff to the new ship.
If you go to this button and press that.
And unfortunately, I left the space station, went to the planet. So that was like 3 autosaves and it only backs up the last 2. And so I'd lost quite literally like maybe 4 hours of progressive play of collecting resources. So it was a lot of resources and a lot of highly refined resources. I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it another go. And then I died and lost my gravestone where you can go and collect stuff. I was like, oh no.
Although that second death wasn't actually the UI. That was kids.
Yes, I got interrupted. I hopped away.
And your character died 3 times. And like, sorry, your stuff is despawned. Then this week we played Void Crew, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Void Crew is a space crew game. So there's 1 to 4 of you on a ship running all the systems. And it really shines when there's 2, 3, or 4 of you. Single player game, it's okay. Multiplayer game, it's a lot of fun. And they've done a lot of updates to it. So there's beautiful space opera graphics and really fun game. Still in early access. And one of the things they added was a new difficulty mode. So we went in with the veteran difficulty we've been going before. And it was challenging, but we kind of aced it. Like, we basically sat in one area farming enemies until we were done.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you want to try the expert level? All right. That got real challenging to the point where we had 3 major missions. And we got to a hair's breadth of finishing the last mission. And we were like, we have to go now or we lose everything.
Yeah.
Like, abort. failed this mission. It's fine. We're alive and we get the rewards. I'm taking that as success. Just go.
It was
And that was
genuinely fun in a
and
stressful way.
stressful.
And stressful. It actually
On top
felt
of
like
me
it was
dying
tight.
because I was being burned alive, even though I shouldn't have been. Like, we had 3% hull left. We like Mikey was like, I need the engines charged. I'm like, I can't get to the engines. The entire ship is filled with lightning.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
I'm
electrical
sorry.
volts, yeah.
Like,
Ah!
there's hazards everywhere. We can't
Yeah.
physically get there in time.
Yep.
Keep moving and keep us alive. Like, that's best we can do. And we did it, and we felt really good. My God, it was stressful.
So this is interesting. So one of the things that I've often done whenever I've played any brand new game, and I've cranked it back a little bit these days because I'm not playing as many games as I did when I was younger. And I've got made a discussion topic. When is playing on hard better? Because the first time I got my butt handed to me was when I was playing Doom Eternal, and I just went, all right. I don't think you can access Nightmare, actually, first off, but I cranked it to the most difficult setting, and it was a different type of gameplay. It wasn't like Doom of old, right? You've got to have the pinata system, whatever it's called, the gore system. You have to go in.
The player to feel like they can cope with it. Maybe only just, like, it should be a challenge, but unlike Project Zomboid, the first few times you play that and you just don't enjoy the game because the learning curve is so impossible. Like, I can't make it out down the street. Like,
that's an interesting one, because obviously a lot of games that you usually play some sort of power fantasy where you can outrun these guys, but no, it's an endless horde. It's
once
very
you get
realistic.
your teeth into that game and you understand the simulation and how it works and the pacing and all the rest of it, you can do really well and you can have a fantastic time until you don't play for a few months. You go back in, it's like, I've forgotten everything. This isn't fun anymore.
Yeah,
which is something I had recently when I tried to play Zomboid again. It's like, nope, I'm right back to this isn't fun. I know it will be fun if I stick with it, but right now I don't have that investment,
right? And that's similar with playing on hard. I remember many years ago, this was on the PS4. I was playing The Last of Us. I've mentioned that already today, but I was playing The Last of Us, and this sticks in my head because
do you play The Last of Us, Mikey?
Occasionally, but I played it, and I got to a point in the game where I just had to stop. And I was playing it on difficult, and I was fine. I wasn't dying all the time or anything along those lines. And then I came back to it like 3 weeks later, and I don't know if you've ever done that, where you come back to a game and there's a control system where you've got to learn some quite rapid movements, and you just can't remember which button to press at the exact time, and you're like,
I had the worst time in Shrouded with that. Like, whenever we get in combat, for some reason my brain won't remember which one is dodge.
Yeah.
So I'll press Alt instead of Control and just switch to my building toolbar, which is really useful in combat. Stand there and effectively wave a tape measure at them. Or I'll open my right, or I'll open my inventory. Like, how did I press B? That's not even the right key.
Yeah.
I find that interesting because I'm not a fan of the Souls-like games. I mean, they look great. I'm glad people are enjoying them, but that level of punishing difficulty, or Super Meat Boy, just doesn't appeal to me.
I was getting quite frustrated with Celeste. It came onto Game Pass on the Xbox, and I was like, oh, I see what this is all about. Played the first two things. I was like, oh, yeah, this is quite good. Got into it. And then I died like 70 times in a row because I'm not used to playing this type of platformer where you have to nail the exact thing and press something within like half a second or even less, like 100 milliseconds of when you need to.
Real precise.
And I was like, oh my word. And I couldn't enjoy it because there was no learning curve. I'm like, where am I supposed to go? This is...
but I find it interesting because a lot of people have been less than excited about Enshrouded because it feels like easy mode on a Souls game.
Okay.
Right? It's got the same kind of dodge and flow in combat, but it's very simplified, and especially in multiplayer. Once you've got the feel for the enemy, it's not challenging. But I like that. I like the sort of gentle, let's use these mechanics, but not stress Yan out too much, and also allow some building and some mining and some adventures. Like, it's a different focus. And I think if you go in thinking this is like Dark Souls, but a different graphics thing,
you're going to be disappointed.
Like you're just going to. If you go in with like, okay, it's taking that style of combat system, but it's not that style of game, you might enjoy it.
It
You
goes
might
on
not.
to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, where if setting expectations for your player is really important, and we were talking about Last Stand Aftermath, where it was the first roguelite I'd ever played that I fully understood, because right at the beginning it said, you're going to die.
But Zomboid says that, and that's not a roguelike. So that defeats my entire point. So just pretend I didn't say that.
Yes, but at least there's some affordance. It says this is how
Yeah.
you died, and you die straight away. It's not surprising, right? And the same with I understand, and I was like, oh, I'm now starting to get these
I'd
things.
really like to see how you get on with Rogue Legacy 2. Like, it's a really interesting game. It's really well made, and like most of these games, it opens up massively. But it can also be very frustrating at the beginning.
It's interesting that I think I need to put some. You know, you get preconceptions about a game, and it looks very cartoony. So I'm like, meh.
Yeah, and it's real tough.
But then again, I thought Vampire Survivors looked very pixely, and I love that game. So
Right. I mean, that's a surprisingly good game. Just before we go,
yep.
because Mike's put the agenda, Yan and Nightingale. I want to point out I haven't made this game. This is not my game. But Nightingale comes out tomorrow. And I am real excited. I think it's going to be a fantastic game, unless it turns out it isn't a fantastic game, it's a flop, in which case I am cynical and sitting back before I make judgment.
Anything else? You sounded very excited about the game. I love
I am
the
very
card
excited
system.
about the game. I think the
that.
card system is exciting. There's a lot of really interesting decisions made in that game. I'm looking forward to trying it. I am aware that it might not live up to the hype because it's a thing.
And it is, of course, early access as well. So who knows what state it will genuinely be into play.
And it's an always online game, which I think in this case they can justify. But while they had a server test with 50,000 people, who knows what launch is going to be like?
It could be terrible. It's very up in the air. We got a question.
Do you find ChatGPT-4 any good? I don't tend to use it. I tend to use image-based ones. Mikey uses ChatGPT a lot more than I do.
So I use GPT all the time. I use it to check stuff. I use it to proofread for me. If someone's not around, I'll often use it as the first pass because it will spot things very quickly. Whether it's grammatical errors or whether it's syntax errors in English, it's going to be able to do it in other coding languages as well. So occasionally, if I've got an error, I'll throw something in there. A lot of the time, it's something like a semicolon missing or an indent is incorrect and things like that. And when it comes to GPT-4, I think it just depends on the domain. If you ask for sales copy, it seems to be pretty good at that sort of thing. If you ask it to proofread stuff, it seems really good at that. If you ask for a code snippet, so can you write me Python code to do X in Blender, X being a very specific thing like add a cube, it'll be able to do that. If you ask it to write your whole add-on, it can do that for one thing, but more than that, it falls apart. You need to understand it's there at the moment, at least. It's there to help you and assist you, almost like someone knowledgeable sat next to you, but not infallible.
I mean, I think it's really interesting as a piece of tech.
Yeah,
as a curiosity. Like,
it's a great tool.
In the real world makes me uneasy. I think generative AI is fascinating as a concept. I love the way that we've sort of accidentally solved the Turing test, and nobody seems to care because it's like, oh yeah, that's clearly not a self-aware machine, is it? You're right. That doesn't. Okay, moving on.
I mean, the one thing is, I think a lot of people are either fearful of it or just don't understand what it is. Ultimately, a large language model is predictive text.
And we did talk about this at the beginning. So when you have some time, like rewatch this when we upload it.
Totally.
And Mikey talks a lot about, and we both do, about how it's great if you have an understanding of the subject as a starting point. But if you don't know the topic and you ask it to do it for you, you don't spot the mistakes, and that can be a real problem.
Yes, and it's not a great. It can be a great learning tool, but also it can also cause you not to learn anything.
Did Mikey mention update for Blender Python course?
Yes. I did.
He did. There's going to be one.
Yeah, coming soon.
I forget what it was. I wasn't paying attention.
I didn't go into specifics. You'll have to wait for the course.
So yeah, we're a little bit over the hour, and I have to make myself some dinner. So that feels like a good
Me
place
too.
to
I haven't
do the thing.
eaten yet. I had coffee, if you can tell. Lovely. Bit of
Not
Foley
me.
there as well. Well, thank
Yep.
you everybody for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us and for letting
Yes.
us into your lovely homes and offices and phones. And why am I in the bathroom? Put this phone away. It's lovely to see everybody or be seen by everybody. And yeah, thank you for having us.
And we'll catch you all again soon. Probably another